the early birds catch the worm, as they say. We have another really good session this morning with welcome Witbooi. And I just as I was thinking this morning, on introducing welcome, and I mean he's got all the accolades, right? He's an actor, he's a philanthropist, and he really is a change maker. I mean, it's when we want to radically transform our lives, I think welcome is the person to talk to. Um, we have so much change going on in businesses, don't we? And to bring somebody in that really gives you the sort of the chutzpah, the wherewithal to be able to manage and cope and thrive with changes is fantastic. But it also just reminded me of why we do this in the first place. It's not just get on a call and book a speaker. It's not that transactional. We want to share the love with our customers. We have incredible speakers that we work with. I mean, we were just chatting to Welcome just now, and all the amazing things he did this weekend, are so interesting, and we just want to be able to share the type of people our speakers actually are. And I don't think you always get to see that, even at a January showcase coming along. But these are more kind of, shall we say, intimate sessions or opportunities to get to know our speakers a lot more. And so I'd really welcome you to, or encourage you to use the chat a little bit more and get to know the person behind the speaker. So I think we could probably kick off, and get welcome sort of on board with everything now, because I know you've all read up about him. I know before you even joined the call, you know that he's fantastic. And yeah, we're delighted to have you with us. Welcome. So let's take it away. Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you, Paul. Thank you to the team as well, and everybody else that's joining us. I'm also very much delighted to be on this platform today, just to be able to share a bit from, not just from my life, but also from a leadership perspective. Because I think that it's a Monday. As we spoke this morning, we talked about everybody's like just trying, it's the hustle and bustle, trying to get into the workspace and, just trying to arrive so that we can have everything ready. And it's also the financial year. And so everybody's trying to just, make ends meet. I'm welcome, as you spell welcome with the E at the end, from a little community called Valhalla Park, which is in the heart of the Western Cape. Not necessarily the lung part, but the heart part, because I think that when Valhalla Park beats, every little Cape Flats community feels that heartbeat. Very, vibrant community, but also a community with its own challenges like, very much gang-riddled, many young boys growing up in a space where they don't really have much to do. So it's either they become gangsters or they end up in prison. So for me, growing up in that environment, kind of like had me in the space where I had to think about what is my options going to be as a young man. And unfortunately, I joined the gangs when I was 12 years old, and then ending up in the system, and also at the age of 17 being processed and then sentenced to 23 years, and then from that 23 years in prison, I did 14 years. But that's not really the conversation I want to have with you today, guys. The conversation I want to have with you is, and I used to call it, the one act of kindness really, really saved my life. And when I talk about the one act of kindness, I'll tell you why I say that is that, when you go into a place like prison, you want to survive because it's not a good place to be in. For those of us, if I could ask in the room how many have been to prison, what I can say is that you want to survive that space, so you would do anything to survive prison. And for me as a young man in that space, 17 years old, not knowing who to trust. And I think in many corporates, when you start working in a corporate environment, that's also the panic that you have. It's like, who do I trust in this space, because there's so much happening in many corporates. And in prison, what we normally looked out for was a lot of backstabbing. It's like 1 minute the guy speaks to you lovingly, and then the next minute they stab you with a dagger or with a knife. And in a corporate, that also happens where you get backstabbed, but you don't see the knife. but in prison, you literally feel it and see it. So that's the difference between our world and that world, but there's always those commonalities between the two. And I want to speak about there's one act of kindness that has always come so true for me in that space, is that no matter how brutal I was in that space, trying to find my own feet, trying to understand the dynamics of leading. Because my father used to tell me, and we didn't really have a good relationship, but my father used to tell me that I have it in me and I have the potential to achieve whatever I want to achieve. But I never really understood what it meant until I was in that space of understanding that I needed to survive prison. And so I needed to tap into my own potential. And that is where I then stepped up to become a leader. And then obviously the leadership that I had to take was not the kind of leadership that is positive, but it's more of a leadership of how do I, take all of these men, which is 2,500 of them, and lead them, and guide them, and ultimately become their go-to person, the person that they can trust. And remember, in prison, we have all sorts of men from different areas, men from different walks of life, all coming together with different dynamics. And it was quite interesting to see how all of these men were looking at me and asking me, how do you lead us from point A to point B to ensure our safety, number one, to ensure that we are coherent, number two, to ensure that we move in a direction that's going to be profitable for everybody. So for those of you that do not understand the prison dynamics, but in prison, we have three gangs, which is the 26s, 27s, and 28s only. And these are the three gangs that mainly rule and control what happens within the prison environment, within the prison system. And these gangs are in all prisons throughout South Africa. And it was crazy for me to be quite in tune with the system and having to lead these men. And in order to survive prison, it's all about profit. It's all about making sure that you reach your profits, you reach that everybody can get paid, that everybody can do what they need to do. So now I'm in the seat where I'm the CEO of the 28. I'm the CEO of this prison. And my job is to listen to complaints mostly, sit and deliberate in conflicts between the 26s, the 28s, the 27s, the 26s, the 26s. It was just crazy. And at the same time, also having to deliberate between the correctional officers that sometimes do not understand the language, because in prison they speak a different language. And often that language is misunderstood, and certain things happen because of the misunderstanding of that language. But the actual point I want to make is, many of us find ourselves in a space where we often think that we understand the environment, only to understand that there's various dynamics, various paradigms that move within that same environment, and sometimes we misunderstand, and that misunderstanding puts us in a position where we have to reevaluate whether we really belong there. I often say that people that are working in the corporate environment have a choice. They can decide to resign and say, I'm done with this. But when you're in prison, you don't have a choice of resigning, because if you resign, well, you get retired. You don't just, get a letter to say, thank you so much for your wonderful service and get a golden watch or a certificate. In prison, when you decide to retire, you get killed. So you do get retired, but that's the way you retire. So it was also that fear from myself as a lead to say that I may not want to be part of the system, because I don't want to be retired, and neither do I want to think of retiring, because I understand the consequences of that. But it was at this moment for myself where, doing the things that I was doing in prison, leading, guiding, and being in control of these 2,500 men, that I realized one day as I was sitting in the courtyard, these men were having a conversation, and the conversation that these two men were having in front of me was, they were laughing about the crimes that they'd committed. They were laughing about what they had done in order to get into prison. And I kind of sensed that there was no remorse to what they were doing. And I felt a bit shame. I felt a bit of guilt within myself. And a question came to me and it said, Welcome. If you were to be a father one day, what kind of father are you going to be? Especially to a girl child. And it was at that moment that I realized that, you know what, I had to change my life. I had to make a different decision. And the different decision meant that I had to go back and tell these men that I no longer felt I no longer felt that I wanted to lead them. I no longer felt that I wanted to be in charge of this that wasn't going to get me anywhere. Being the leader of 2,500 men in a prison like Paulsmo, which was the five most deadliest prisons in the world, making 500,000 Rand a month, making sure that everything ran like a well-oiled machine, making sure that everybody communicated in a language that they understood, that we could make profit. And I asked myself, at the end of the day, the success of this place inside would not necessarily be the success of my own life. Because in this place, I would lose who I am. And not just that, but I would also eventually die. And that is not something that I wanted to do. I was young when I was sentenced. I felt that I had the years. I felt that I had the experience to survive that place. But I realized that years and years of being in this leadership, I was losing more and more of myself. I was becoming less of a human and more of an animal. I was becoming so brutal that I forgot who I was as a human being. And that is sometimes something that happens to most CEOs. You become so power hungry, ego driven, that it's about the position and not about the people. That it becomes about you and how inflated you get in your position as a leader. You kind of like lose touch with who you are as a person. And for me, I felt that. I felt like I was becoming so out of touch. I was losing who I was as a human being, and I was becoming this animal that consistently wanted to be good at what I was doing. I wanted to be known, I wanted to be worthy, I wanted to be seen, I wanted to be heard, but I was speaking in the wrong language. I wanted to be heard, but I was speaking in the wrong tone. And that part of leadership I was missing. I was missing the part of leadership where I could truly connect to these men, transition from being brutal to operating from a place of love. But because I was in a prison environment, I realized that there was no space for love. Because the minute I exhibited any form of love or any form of compassion, I would be seen as weak and therefore be taken out. And it was at that moment that I realized that this environment, this position that I was in, was not affording me the position or the right to lead from a place of love. I'd rather step back and take my chances with raising my hand and saying, gentlemen, I no longer see the benefit of leading. And that was the test that I had to take at the end of the day. And for me, stepping into that circle and having to speak to these men and having to tell them that I no longer saw the benefit in leading in this way. I want to be excused from the gangs. And that part of being excused from the gangs is a very, very long story. But I remember sitting in that circle where these four generals had to decide what had to happen to me because of that decision of choosing not to be a gang member anymore. And I remember one of them looking at me and saying, Welcome, do you remember 6 years ago, I could not read, I could not write. And because you taught me to read and write, today I can read and write. This gentleman that reminded me of that had the power to kill me, and he chose not to because of that one act of kindness. Because I taught him to read and write 6 years ago, I was standing there begging to be released from the gangs, begging for my life. And the only thing that he remembered, which stuck with him, was the fact that I taught him to read and write. So, what I want to say to CEOs or businessmen or people within the business sector, or even in corporate, even in the world out there, is that no matter how powerful you are, no matter what title you have, no matter how, you are the rock star, you're driving your Mercedes Benz, your Ferrari, your Bugatti, whatever you are driving, and that does not make you a leader. What makes you a leader is when you stop on the side of the road and you say, this person needs help, let me help. Or you're sitting in your office and you decided, listen, no, I saw Melanie this morning and I saw that she didn't look well, calling her into your office and sitting her down and saying, Melanie, what's going on? How can I help? That is what makes you a leader. Being in touch with the people that you are charged with, being in touch with how they feel and how they come to work. And because if they are happy where they are working, they become more productive. And for me, it was that space of realizing that now I had to make a choice to step out of this dangerous leadership and step into a different type of leadership. And this guy, remembering the fact that I taught him to read and write, saved my life. And that is why I'm able to tell my story today, because if I did not make an impact, I would have been dead. And if I had chosen a different path of not helping him or being like the rest of the other prisoners saying, this is your master, easy, and therefore I'm not going to help you, it would have been a different ending for me. But it was at that moment, that one act of kindness that saved my life. And I am where I am today because of that. My life from there changed drastically as I then got a bursary to study, and I studied at UNISA correspondence because it was the only university at that moment that offered correspondence, and I did teaching. And while I was doing teaching, I found a different calling. Instead of leading men to their deaths, I could lead men to live. I could teach them. And I stepped into teaching completely. I remember being transferred to Brandvlei prison, which was in the mountains in Worcester, and we had this cold cell. And I asked the head of prison, listen, I'm no longer a gang leader. I've resigned that position. I still have the tattoos on my shoulder that shows that I'm a general, but I'm not active. And he said, welcome, it's difficult to trust those ones that say they're not longer active, because what did you just using the Zembe, the bail, the skill of getting involved, and then, you do your thing. And I said, trust me, just give me a classroom, give me a few offenders, and I will teach them to read, I'll teach them to write, I'll teach them numeracy, I'll do whatever I can to help them develop and skill themselves positively. He trusted me, gave me a cell, and I had three inmates that I was busy working with. And it was amazing that those three grew to six, those six grew to seven, eight, until we had a class or a cell of 15 inmates. The head of center then said, the head of prison said, you know what, you can't be in the cell anymore. Let me move you out. They got us a different space. And now we had ended up in 2 months, 3 months time, we ended up with 35 students. And the prison said, you know what, this is a school. They registered as a school. They got correctional officers to support us in our schooling. And it became a school at Brandvlei Prison. We had a container outside that housed, that educated 35 learners. And within that same time of teaching, I achieved my qualifications from UNISA in 2008, and I passed with a distinction. And in that same year, as we had our exams, our matriculants, we had 100% pass rate of our matriculants while in prison. And for me, that was the greatest achievement. Imagining from becoming a gang leader that taught these men how to stab, how to steal, how to do business, and how to be ruthless, to a phase where I now transitioned, and within prison, teaching these men how to say 1+1 is 2, how to do numeracy, how to do English, how to learn to become responsible for themselves. And that was the transition that I had to go through while I was in prison. And the reason why I wanted to change my life while in prison is because I wanted to test the theory of saying that most offenders that come out of prison, they choose to leave prison and say, I want to be a changed man the minute I get out. But because of all the temptations outside, that change sometimes short-lived. But the minute you change while we are within your circumstances, that's the best part. I'm reminded by a guy that used to smoke, who was in prison with me, Tabo, and he was the leader of the 26ers, and he was in a cell with me, and he wanted to quit smoking. And he used to buy a pack of cigarettes. And I said, Tabo, but you said you want to quit smoking. Why do you always buy a pack of cigarettes? I don't understand. He said, welcome. If I buy these cigarettes and I put them in my cupboard, when I open it, I see it. I see it daily. I face what I don't want daily. And that is what makes me stronger. And he taught me that in order for us to become to embrace change. We need to face those things that we fear the most head on, and opening our eyes and walking into to say that, yes, this might be the situation that I'm facing, but I'm able to overcome it because I'm staring it right in the eyes and saying, fear will not hold me captive. And that is why I want to share with you and say that my past no longer holds me captive. Yes, today I'm an actor, I'm a philanthropist. I run an organization that works with young people called Bright Spark Foundation SA. Yes, I'm a speaker. I go all over South Africa and hopefully one day all over the world, speaking and telling my story. But the most important thing and the most amazing thing about my life today is that I am a partner. I am a husband. I am a father. I never thought that I could be those things. Judging from the life I had to the life I have right now, when my daughter really looks at me, as young as she is, we dance together, we smile together. And I know that my daughter can look at me and say that I know that I have a father that no longer hurts people. I have a father that no longer takes things from people. I have a father that gives back, that saves lives. And the love I have for young people is to say that the work we do with them is to ensure that they don't make the same mistakes that Welcome did. Because if I had a person like me that could come into my school and talk about the dangers of going to prison, talk about the dangers of being in gangs, I would not have gone there. I want to be that person today that can tell young people that education is key. Education saved my life. If it wasn't for education, I would not be where I'm at today. So therefore, education is always key. Today, I'm studying, I'm en route to doing my MBA at Henley Business School. And I'm proud to step into that saying to myself that I want to be a different leader. I don't want to be a leader that just speaks. I want to be a leader that does. Because there's this beautiful thing that I read is that righteousness, actually, I'm saying it's not something that I read. It says righteousness without love is just an opinion. Righteousness without action is just an opinion. So once we apply action to what we say, we can change the world. So I want to challenge all of you out there, leaders, managers. If you really want to push, if you really want your team to be amazing, to be excellent, drive them from the heart, lead from the heart. Don't just talk it, walk it. And when you walk it, they will see that your footsteps are aligned to theirs and they will follow and they will love what they do. And you will become a successful business because you're operating from the heart. Thank you.
Wow. Hope you can hear all the cheering in the background. Welcome, even on a fresh Monday morning like this. There's some nice comments in the group. Samantha's reminded us all that she has worked with you and just highly recommends you to everybody. But I think in our spirit of getting to know you a bit better, and you have opened up so nicely this morning. I love what you said about facing your fears as well on a daily basis, and don't let that hold you back. I mean, I'm sure you've had a few demons in your mind as well, and yet despite all that, you kind of just persevere and you keep what's important. Close to heart. Could I ask you? I mean, and you might take 15 minutes to answer this question with everything that goes on in your life. But could I ask you, like in a year's time, 2 years time, what does success? I mean, you already achieved a huge measure of success. Well, what does the future success look like to you? Well, what would have to happen? And I think it's good for us to know on the call because obviously we want to get you booked for conferences and that sort of thing. But what's behind it? Tell us a little bit more than you have already about the love and action that would go with that for the year ahead.
Yeah, I think for me, Paul, thank you for that question. I think success for me is being able to work in a space with people that have a like-mindedness, that want to see other people grow, that want to see the economy grow, that want to see themselves grow. Success is where we as a community can say, how do we come together as one? And to deal with issues that we have within our country as a nation, to say that despite what has happened in the past, we are all moving in the same direction where we want to prosper as a nation. Success for me is having more present fathers play roles and be more available to their children. Success for me is having mothers taking the time and saying, you know what, let's talk, let's sit down. What is bothering you? What are you going through? Especially to mothers that have sons. Because when sons are able to express their feelings to their mothers, they become different partners, they become different husbands because they are taught to love, they are taught to share. I come from a community, Paul, where we as men are discouraged from speaking about our feelings. We are discouraged from opening up and telling our women and the people in our lives how we truly feel. Success is being able to say to these men that you no longer have to fear talking about how you feel. You can sit down and we can talk. Tell me how you feel, so we can get on that conversation, and we can kind of like, support each other. Success for me is building a nation that is driven by love, driven by compassion, because that's the only currency that really, really gets us to where we need to get to. Because without love, without compassion, we are not going to be a nation that's going to stand long. So for me, success is love. That's in a nutshell. Success is loving each other, sharing from a place of love. Because once we love each other, we are able to find solutions that work for all of us. It's not a situation of tolerating each other, but it's a situation of saying, I'm doing this because I love you, and not being afraid to do it because I know that you have my back and I have yours, and trusting each other that we want to see the company grow, we want to see the country grow, we want to see our families grow. But in order for that to happen, we need to do it from a place of love, not from a place of ego, not from a place driven from what I want from you. What can you take? What can you get? It's not about benefiting. It's not just about making a profit. People are the profit. That's it.
Such a beautiful answer. And I'll tell you what, you've definitely made my week. Um, Welcome. We are so chuffed to be working with you. It's just extraordinary. And today was a great example of just why we do love you the way we do. So thank you very much for this morning. It's really appreciated.